Hey folks, this is Pigohan on the North American server, and this is the Richelieu, the Tier 8 French battleship. The map is Sea of Fortune, it is Domination, and a shout out to Mofton in the Mighty Vanguard, and Sherman in the Otago. The Richelieu seems to be a very polarizing ship. There are people that seem to really like it, and people who seem to really don't. That being said, I don't think you can call it mediocre, because if you look at the stats on NA, she actually has above average win rate and above average damage. Thus, I'm not sure why the general sentiment seems to tend negative for the ship, but I suspect it's because she's very different from the Leon. The Leon generally being considered a very OP ship for Tier 7. That being said, the way I like to look at this is if the Leon is a big club, the Richelieu is more like a knife. With the Leon, you just drive around real fast and blast away at people with the ridiculous 16 guns. With the Richelieu, you have to be precise. You've got half the number of barrels, and even though they are generally well handling, generally pretty powerful guns, they aren't Yamato levels of accurate. The trick is that these guns are on a platform that generally gives you a pretty good chance of putting them where they're needed, especially with regard to like setting up crossfires. In this game, our destroyer on this flank is being a potato and refusing to spot the cap, so I'm gonna pull up to this corner and wait a little bit. Now, camping a corner is something people like to do in like other quote-unquote bow-in battleships like the North Carolina and the Iowa, but I generally loathe to do it in those ships for two reasons. One, if you go perfectly bow-in an NC or an Iowa, you're generally giving up the firepower of the back turret. Also, those ships are really not maneuverable, so it can be very painful to back out of these corner situations if you need to. The Richelieu does not suffer from these problems because the guns are all in the front of the ship, and she has a speed boost, which, in my opinion, is not intended to be used to boost your top speed. Rather, it's meant to be used to increase your agility while at low speeds and while maneuvering. So now we've seen where the Sibs is. We've also seen that most of the enemy team is actually on the other side. Mofton's already charged the cap and turned around, so now we're going to hit the speed boost and start moving toward the cap. In the meantime, we've been taking pot shots at the broadside North Carolina in the background, and you've seen that we've done pretty good damage. None of those salvos were amazing, but I felt like they were all solid. And that might just be what you have to live with in a quote-unquote undergun ship like the Richelieu. So the Sims is doing something stupid and coming back, and you'll notice here I actually held the shot until he turned broadside. That's because BBAP was removed from the game in the latest patch, so you can't get full pens on lengthwise destroyers anymore. Previously, I might have fired while he was bow in, because I felt that the Richelieu was actually very good at getting those full pens on lengthwise destroyers, but alas, it is what it is. So now we basically got the cap, and I just want to finish off the low health NC out there. We were getting some good penetrations and even citadels earlier, but because these are still 15-inch guns, even though they have good shell velocity and good penetration, as soon as battleships start to angle, you're going to start seeing a lot of bounces, to the extent that you may even want to use the HE. Ultimately, despite what I said earlier about never really getting any big salvos, I do find the Richelieu's guns are pretty predictable, in the sense that if the enemy's showing a broadside, you're generally going to get a solid hit, and if they're angled, you're generally going to get nothing. Like you saw in that Tirpitz, 10k wasn't much, but I was pretty confident I was going to get that 10k when I shot at that mildly angled Tirpitz. Okay, so this is the part of the game where the red team is going to start to throw. If you look at the score, they're down one ship, but they've got both caps and a strong position in the center. On the flip side, our team has run away really far back into our spawn, which is bad, but at the same time, we're starting to create a crossfire since the reds are clustering up into the B cap for whatever reason. I'm just trying to reposition the ship such that I can take shots into the middle of the map when those guys have to angle against our ships in the south. And saw we got a pretty good hit on the King George earlier and the Citadel on the Kronstadt. Really, what I think the enemy team should do is probably just stay put and dig in. If they camp the east side of the islands in front of me, they can angle to the guys in the south, and I can't do anything about that. But that's just not how random teams work. First victim here is the Alsace. As you can see, we did not land a monster salvo, but it was a solid 11k since he was broadside. I did aim at the waterline. The French ships have a mild turtleback, I guess. I'm not entirely sure if you should go for upper belt or waterline at times. Musashi, though, is very fragile from the side. I was actually surprised that I did not get a Citadel with that salvo. But you'll see on the next one, I also started moving a little bit because this is a Musashi against Alsace and like 15, 16-inch battleships. You can just tank the shells, but Musashi overmatches, so you gotta wiggle a little bit if they're shooting at you and get them to try to hit the belt. Musashi goes behind that island, and it looked like he wanted to turn in towards me, so I started to pull forward to see if I could get a better angle on him when he exits the other side of the island. Unfortunately, he actually starts turning the other way, and since we don't have a broadside anymore, we get a pretty mediocre hit. If Musashi was the only target, here is probably when I would switch to HE, but we don't need to do that because here comes player 3, the Kronstadt. Now, the Kronstadt is a little bit smarter than his friends who went before him, but we still get a fairly decent salvo, though he decides that he wants to angle in toward our side of the map. If you look at the mini-map, he actually has decent angle toward myself and toward the Iowa and Mofton in the south, but if he keeps moving, he can't really maintain that, so this is still very questionable. I debated there whether to shoot at the nose or the belt of the Kronstadt. I saw we got 2 pens and 3 bounces. That was probably 2 going through the nose and 3 bouncing on the belt. Broadside Miyoko shows up just as my cooldown comes up, and I think this is a shot that was saved by the fast shell velocity of the Richelieu. Something like an NC, the shells probably would not have gotten there before he disappeared behind that island. Remember, the Miyoko is very tanky when angled, but not when it is broadside. Also, that was high caliber there at 196,000, and we're gonna crack 200,000 with the death of the Kronstadt. Overturned a little bit here, and I'm showing broadside to the King George, but I guess that isn't quite the worst ship you could broadside. The King George was distracted, and he's going down anyway. So, Miyoko is still at that corner, and for some reason he's shooting AP. But since we can't see him, I'm going to put the other turret on the Mogami down there. Miyoko does show himself, though, and since the guns were out of sync, because I wasted a salvo on the KGV, I had one for the Miyoko, and again, this may have been saved by the Richelieu's high gun velocity. I suggested also that the Miyoko was being dumb by shooting AP, but I was also dumb by giving him a bit of broadside. The Richelieu is 32 mil all over, and if you give broadside to an AP firing heavy cruiser, you'll get shit on. He did like 8k and 5k salvos, so that is a thing. I'm dashing for the middle now, since we need to stop the points, and taking some pot shots at the Mogami along the way. Once again, moderately angled, made a pretty good shot at getting the Citadel, but as soon as he angles, all we got was a bounce. This is the same deal with the Tirpitz. Gonna take a pot shot at him, and then here's the first time we're going to switch to HE. Now, I am broadside and spotted to the turpets while I'm making this run, but a couple hits from the turpets on my broadside at this range isn't going to kill me, while not stopping the cap will lose us the game, given that we have a minute and 3 left. Whiffed the shot against the turpets because I was impatient, but it's whatever. He didn't get any damage on me, and I need to turn the guns toward the cap before I get in case the destroyer is waiting for me here. However, since I wasn't spotted, I can be pretty sure he's not somewhere nearby, and I can swing the guns back around. For the most part, turret traverse on the Richelieu is not that impressive, but you don't really notice it because of the way they're arranged. It's only when you have to swing them side to side while kiting that it's really bad. Turpets goes down, but we keep HE loaded for the destroyer. Since I was never spotted while I was in B, I kind of assume that he's going to A, so we're going to start going that way after we get the cap. Sure enough, A starts ticking, and we're actually spotted briefly, so you know that the destroyer is actually right through that crack and going behind the small island at the edge of A. I like this game because it shows off the strength not only of the unique gun position, but also of the speed of the Richelieu, in that we were able to come from A to B so fast, and now go back to A. An NC would not have been able to do this. This last bit is a little lucky. He was going north to south, so I went north, such that he wouldn't be able to YOLO torp me, since I have no idea how much health he has. I just want to be able to safely get into the cap for now, even though we do need to kill him. Instead, though, this guy makes himself an easy target by beaching himself on the island, though we almost throw the game by taking torps, but at least I was smart enough to chain fire, and the second salvo takes him out. Looking at the results, 228,000, 4 kills, 8 sits, solo cap. This is a really good result for the Richelieu. We were top of the team by a long shot with almost 3,000 base XP. 228,000 is among the top 100 best Richelieu damages in NA, but as you saw, you really need to be a bit lucky to get these kind of games. We were kind of fed broadsides for a while in the middle there. Like I said, though, I think this replay does a good job of highlighting the strengths of the Richelieu. And on that note, it is the end of the replay, so have a nice day.